Alrighty, folks. Well, good morning. How's everyone doing today? Good. Well, my name is Brett, and I'd like to welcome you up here to Fort Mackinac today. And joining me out here, we've got Craig, Andy, and John. We represent the 4 soldiers on duty so far here today. Now, before we step back and fire off the rifles, I'd like to talk for just a moment about some military music. Back in the 1880s, music wasn't just used for entertainment. In fact, it had a very practical purpose here in the Army, because we didn't have things like radios and walkie-talkies to communicate. We had to use musicians to do that. The United States Army has employed all sorts of different instruments throughout its history to do so, and the oldest of which is the drum right here. The drum had several different calls throughout the United States period of Army history. But by the 1880s, we've come to realize it's got a little bit of a problem. It only gets one note. There's only so much you can do with that one note, and the calls can kind of get confusing. And I'll demonstrate that confusion for you by playing a couple of calls. The first is the emergency long roll. That would tell the men that there's an emergency. Pretty simple call. Then I'll play the ceasefire call that would tell the men to stop firing their rifles. Imagine being out in the field of battle and trying to wonder, well, is there an emergency or should I stop shooting? So the Army realized that was becoming to be quite the problem, so it introduced a more melodic instrument called the fife. Now the fife is a flute-like instrument. It's 36 notes, so it's about 36 times better than the drum in that respect. And it had all sorts of different calls for it as well. And I'm going to play one of those calls from the 1812 era, and it's called assembly. That would tell the men if it's time to assemble. Very good. Assembly. So the fife made a good signaling instrument for a large majority of the United States Army history, but it had some issues. By the 1880s, even this was used just primarily for ceremonial purposes. Because by this time, we found out that the bugle was a very good signaling instrument. It only got 5 notes, so it was a good compromise between the 1 of the drum and the 36 of the fife. So it was fairly easy to learn, but still maintained that melodic property. And it had about 70 different calls written for it. Everything from reveille to wake them up in the morning, extinguish lights or taps to put them to bed at night. It had mess calls that would tell the men it's time to what? Eat, our favorite here today. And also things on the battlefield like commence and ceasefire and charge, retreat, all sorts of different calls. Actually, if you'd like to hear some of those today, just look for John right here, and he'd be happy to pull out the bugle for you folks. And with that, I am going to turn things over to John here today. He's going to tell you guys about the different uniforms that we're wearing. Terry, Foreman center. Mark. Come on, out. Face. Bird. Thank you.